Scottish history reimagined.
Good morning, and welcome once again to the Spirit of Scotland 1314. Previously on Spirit of Scotland, we looked at, in part 1 of our series, we looked at the existence of the Magna Via Quadrigarum Abbattis, the great carriage road of the Abbott in the area of Cambus Kenneth, and how it may have impacted on the outcome of the Battle of Bannockburn. Through the Fulch Charter, we determined the existence of the road, and we inferred the extent of the road across the karstlands of Stirling. So for part 2 of that series, I've brought you to an area just outside Larbert. Why Larbert? Well, we know that the day before the first day of the Battle of Bannockburn on the 23rd of June, that the English camped for the evening in Falkirk and travelled from there to Stirling. So the area I'm in just outside Larbert is on the exit from Falkirk, and in this field there is an old map showing a Roman road which crosses behind me here, across the River Carriage and on its way directly to the Milton Ford and onwards to St Ninians and Stirling Castle. So would this be the road that the English army would have taken on its route to Bannockburn? So join me today as we have a look around us. I'll put up the drone and look at some maps so you can get a perspective of where we are. And we will discuss the logistics of the English army waking up that morning and marching across to Bannockburn. How long would it take? How long was the baggage train? What was involved? We'll try and keep it a short film, and thereafter we'll get back over to Stirling and we will continue our look at the Magna Via Quadrigarum Abbattis, the great cart road of the Abbott, and the impact it may have had on the battle. So let's go have a discussion about the logistics and have a look around here at Larbert. For Edward II, the campaign of 1314 was not simply a military expedition. It was one of the largest logistical enterprises undertaken by the English crown since the reign of his father. Long before Robert the Bruce chose the ground on which he would fight, Edward's officials had spent months assembling men, horses, food, weapons, carts and animals from every corner of England and Wales. The result was not merely an army, it was a moving city. Modern audiences often imagine medieval armies as columns of armoured knights riding through the countryside, followed by ranks of infantry. Contemporary illustrations reinforce this impression, showing glittering cavalry beneath fluttering banners. Such images capture the romance of medieval warfare, if there is such a thing, but conceal its reality. The true measure of Edward's expedition, therefore, lay not simply in the number of soldiers he commanded, but in the extraordinary effort required to sustain them on their journey into Scotland. The machinery of government began to move. Food was purchased, weapons manufactured, repaired and readied, wagons requisitioned, pack horses were hired, smiths prepared horseshoes by the thousand, carpenters built replacement wheels, drovers assembled herds of cattle destined to become tomorrow's meals. The campaign consumed resources on a national scale. So how large was his army? No medieval chronicler gives us an exact figure, and some later writers inflated the numbers enormously, claiming 100,000 men or more. Such estimates belong to myth and legend rather than history. Most modern historians generally suggest that Edward II commanded somewhere between 18,000 and 22,000 fighting men, including approximately 2,000 heavy cavalry, supported by several thousand archers and a large body of infantry. Yet even these figures tell only part of the story. Medieval armies travelled with large numbers of people who never fought. Every knight maintained one or more mounted servants. Senior nobles travelled with substantial households. Clerks, chaplains, surgeons, armourers, cooks, carpenters and blacksmiths accompanied the march. Merchants followed the army, hoping to profit from supplying necessities. Drovers managed cattle. Farriers cared for horses. Labourers dug latrines, repaired roads and erected tents. Women and children were also present, although chroniclers rarely mention them. Taken together, the total number of people moving with Edward's expedition may possibly have approached 30,000 people. That figure would make the English host one of the largest moving populations in Britain during the early 14th century. Edward's expedition probably included around 5,000 horses. When heavy cavalry, riding animals, pack horses and draft horses are combined, a war horse consumed roughly 10 to 12 kilograms of fodder each day, together with large quantities of fresh water, about 30 to 50 litres a day in summer. That's a minimum of 60 metric tonnes of water a day required for the cavalry alone. Riding horses required substantial grazing, while draft horses pulling wagons demanded still more. And feeding them represented one of the greatest problems facing the army. If horses provided speed, then oxen supplied endurance. Throughout medieval Europe, heavy wagons were more commonly hauled by oxen than horses. They were slower, but immensely powerful, capable of pulling large loads over difficult ground while consuming cheaper fodder. The Abbott's Great Carriage Road almost certainly witnessed teams of oxen hauling grain and timber between Cambus Kenneth estates long before Edward's campaign. The English army almost certainly employed them too. Exactly how many wagons accompanied Edward II remains unknown. No contemporary source records the figure. Yet reasonable estimates may be made. If one heavy wagon served approximately 40 to 50 fighting men, together with additional wagons carrying tents and royal supplies, the English baggage train may have comprised between 400 and 600 wagons. Some were four-wheeled, others were smaller two-wheeled cars. Many required 4 horses. The heaviest demanded 6 and perhaps even 8 oxen. Imagine such a procession stretching along a narrow medieval road. Each wagon occupied perhaps 6 or 7 metres. Allow another 10 metres between vehicles to prevent collisions, and immediately the scale becomes apparent. The wagons alone might extend for 6 to 8 kilometres, even before horses, livestock and marching infantry were included. The road governs the army, so this brings us to one of the central points regarding our investigation today. Large medieval armies did not choose routes freely. They were constrained by the carrying capacity of roads. Modern engineers classify roads according to axle loads and bridge strengths. Medieval commanders thought in simpler terms. Would the wagons pass? Could the bridge carry them? And would the wheels sink? Could oxen pull the load? Would there be enough room to turn? These practical questions mattered more than almost any tactical consideration. Consequently, established carriage roads assumed enormous strategic importance. A road built originally for monastic commerce might suddenly become indispensable to an invading army, simply because no better alternative existed. The Great Carriage Road of Cambus Kenneth now begins to assume a significance far beyond its modest appearance in a medieval charter. By June 1314, the English army had concentrated around Berwick before moving northwest through the lowlands. Contemporary accounts and the surviving road network suggest that the final stage of the advance brought Edward's host through Linlithgow and Falkirk before it turned towards Stirling. Falkirk was more than a convenient stopping place. It was a natural assembly point. Here the army could regroup after its long march from England, redistribute supplies and prepare for the final day's advance. And it is here that we can begin to reconstruct with reasonable confidence how the army actually moved. Not simply where it marched, but how. Here we are on the map in the area which we are discussing. So, courtesy of the National Library of Scotland, we're looking at an 1892 to 1905 25-inch Ordnance Survey map. 25-inch makes it a bit difficult for scrolling about the screen, but we shall do our best. Here you can see the modern day road crossing the River Carron in blue here, and the railway going across the River Carron, which you will see in the drone shot shortly. Why do we believe they crossed in this area? Well, off to this area is Falkirk and Stenhousemuir in this area. And it was a great stopping off point for many travellers. Indeed, in the 16th and 17th century, the tryst in this area, just off screen here, was the largest cattle market in Scotland, and many of the drove roads of Scotland headed to Falkirk, to this area, which handled up to 150,000 cattle a day at its peak. So there was roads from all over Scotland came into the Falkirk area. It was well connected. Now, if we just follow the flight of the drone up the Carron here, we fly past which you'll see the Larbert Weir on the River Carron, and we go further up to where I stood to do our presentation on the high bank of at the side of the river here, which you will see shortly. Looking down, you will see the Roman road as indicated on this map, not on all maps, but certainly on some. Whether archaeologists have definitely determined this is a route of the Roman road or whether it is inferred, I will need to do more investigation on. But there you go, the Roman road taking you back towards the Falkirk area, and on this map it is clearly marked as the site of the Roman bridge. Carrying on upwards will take you up past Torwood Castle, the Torwood, and there on towards Milton, St Ninians, and the area of Stirling Castle. So is this the route that the English would have taken as they advanced on Bannockburn? My one concern about this particular route is that when you get to this bit of the River Carron, I believe there's easier places where you could have chose to make a crossing. Why do I say that? Well, let me show you about the steep bankings that exist around this. See it on the map here, indicated by this hatching, and if I put it on the LiDAR, you'll get an idea of what we're talking about. Roman road comes up here, and you can see it's quite incised. The Carron's quite incised into the landscape round about here. Why wouldn't you just go back to where the modern crossing exists and cross there? Now, I have to say that there is evidence of landfill in this area, so it may have risen over the years. I will need to do a wee bit more investigation to see just how much. If there is substantial landfill in this area, any sign of the Roman road would have been obliterated, regrettable, and we certainly see no signs of it on the LiDAR. But there you go. Let me just follow north to give you an idea. Now, when you cross here, there are two routes, as we have mentioned before. There is the Roman road route, which will take you, as I say, past the Torwood and into Milton and St Ninians and Stirling. Or you can go the Pleen road, because as you come to the Torwood, following the Roman road here, you will see just adjacent to that there is another road which would have existed back then. Here we come into the Torwood, which was much more extensive back then and was an area in which the Scots had camped prior to the Battle of Bannockburn. No doubt done much of their training there. This is a road that will take you down through Pleen, ultimately onto Bannockburn and the site of the Spittal Bridge Ford. Call it Spittal Bridge, it was Spittal Ford at the time. The Roman road brings us up to this area here. You can see just off the Roman road, this raised area is an Iron Age fort, a tumulus, in the area of Carriage Hill, probably reappropriated by the Romans overlooking that road at some point. So that's quite an interesting point. Here you see the Roman road, as indicated, joins into the area of the modern road, and that takes you straight up towards, as I say, Milton and St Ninians. If I just drag you over this way a little bit, so here's our road. The more northerly route takes you through Pleen. Please excuse the 25-inch map, it doesn't make this particularly easy. And when you zoom out, you lose a bit of focus on it. There, that one takes you towards the Bannockburn and in towards the area of what would have been the Spittal Ford and up towards St Ninians and the kirk where the Scottish Thomas Randolph and his troops were situated. This here is the Roman road that we were following. Crosses the Bannockburn, just adjacent to Milton and the Milton Ford and Beaton's Mill, as indicated on the map, and it takes you back, as I say, please excuse the 25-inch OS map, oops, here's a Roman road coming down there, through the Torwood. Here is Torwood Castle, and in this area you've got a very well ancient and established well here. So there's probably been in the area of Torwood Castle a castle of sorts for many, many, many years. Certainly going back prior to what's existing there just now, which is in ruins, back to the medieval period. That well would be very handy and would be well guarded. So there's the Roman road coming back into the area of Larbert where we did our film from this area here. So let's have a look at the drone shots. Flying over the route of the Roman road here as it comes up to the peak of the bend in the River Carron where it crosses over. And at that peak in the bend you see the slope that comes down to the Carron. Now is that part of the landfill or is that natural? We'll need to find out. Carron quite still there, non-tidal above the Lade or the Weir. Would have been tidal back in the day. And we're just rising up looking west just now from the Carron. And the houses you see on the horizon way in the distance there, that's Denny and Dunipace. And as the camera spins round, it takes you in the direction of Milton and Stirling. We're flying here in the vicinity of the Roman road as it comes up to Torwood Castle here. Now Roman road, Drover's road, were they one and the same thing or were they slightly different? You see Torwood Castle just coming into bottom right there, and stretching out in front of you is the Torwood itself. It would have been a much more extensive forest back in the medieval time. That's where the Scots went prior to Bannockburn. They met there, probably trained there. It's a great historic area in its own right with brocks, blue pools, ancient oaks, etc, etc. And we are flying over towards the Stirling area. Continuing along the Roman road as it approaches Stirling, I'll just point out a few landmarks here. This is the modern road, and it's in the vicinity of this road that the Roman road is said to come along. We have here in the foreground Croftside Park Farm. The Roman road will come down this way somewhere. In this area here, we've got the Milton Ford. If we look slightly to the left, this is the Bannockburn Visitor Centre here. And of course, sitting prominently on its rock, Stirling Castle. And over to the right here, there's a Bannockburn High School sitting on top of the escarpment, which when you go down through the Balquidder Wood, which is these trees here, takes you down into the flat carse where day 2 of the Battle of Bannockburn was fought. So there we go. Did the English approach in from this direction as they came up to Stirling on the 23rd of June. Imagine the scene shortly before sunrise on the 23rd of June 1314. The English camp is already awake. Smiths rekindle their forges, farriers inspect horses, and drovers begin moving cattle. Servants strike tents while clerks check wagons and loads. The king's household prepares for departure. Orders pass down the column. The march is about to begin. Yet the army does not move in a single body. Instead, it leaves camp in carefully organised stages. The mounted scouts depart first. They are followed by engineers and pioneers, whose task it is to inspect bridges, remove obstructions, and repair difficult stretches of road. Behind them come the leading divisions of the fighting men. Only then does a great baggage train begin to move. The rear guard follows last, ensuring that nothing is left behind. By the time the final wagons leave Falkirk, the head of the column may already be several miles ahead. So how long was the column? Well, this question has rarely been asked, and it deserves careful consideration. Assume conservatively that Edward's army comprised around 20,000 fighting men, perhaps 10,000 additional non-combatants, 5,000 horses, 1,500 pack animals, 400 to 600 wagons, herds of cattle and flocks of sheep. Now imagine this force moving along a road no more than 15 or 20 feet wide. Infantry typically march 4 or 5 abreast. Mounted men required greater spacing. Wagons needed room to brake, turn and negotiate uneven ground. Livestock moved at their own pace. Even allowing for a disciplined march, the resultant column would probably have stretched for as much as 6 miles. John Barber, Scots poet and writer of the Bruce, states 3 miles. That's still a considerable distance. To put that into perspective, if the leading cavalry reached the outskirts of Stirling shortly before noon, the final wagons might only have recently left Falkirk. So what was the pace of the march? How fast could such a force travel? Well, not very quickly. Mounted scouts might cover 4 or 5 miles an hour. Individual knights could ride faster still. But an army moves at the pace of its slowest component. In this case, that was a heavy wagon train. Oxen rarely maintained more than 2 miles an hour over any sustained distance. Frequent halts were unavoidable. Wheels required adjustment, harnesses failed, animals tired, and streams had to be crossed. A realistic average for the day's march is probably between 2 and 2.5 miles an hour, including short pauses. Though we know Edward pushed his men hard on the march towards Stirling. From Falkirk to the approaches of Stirling is a distance of approximately 10 to 12 miles, depending on the chosen route. This suggests a marching time of around 5 to 6 hours. And this estimate fits remarkably well with the contemporary narratives describing the English army reaching the vicinity of Stirling during the late morning or around midday on the 23rd of June. So we are confirming documented details here. On that note, Let's head back to Stirling and take up the story there.